Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the DWAWG 2021 January meeting. As I indicated earlier, this meeting will be recorded and placed on our YouTube channel. You are now being recorded. Please, if you can, join the meeting this morning with your camera off and your audio muted. That way we go ahead and limit any background distractions and save people bandwidth for the best meeting experience. If during the DWAWG you have any question, please feel free to enter that into the chat functionality. If you are trying to access the chat functionality, there is the top bar, which gives you a lot of your navigational items, and there is a text bubble that you can click on that will allow you to open up the chat on the right-hand side of your viewing bar. If you use your raise hand feature, which would be in the viewing bar at the top next to the chat function, which looks like a hand, I'll be able to see who is raising their hand and I can call on you. And in that case, you can go ahead and turn on your functionality for your audio and your video if you have those capabilities and ask your question directly instead of using the chat function. If presentations are ongoing, chances are we will wait until the open discussion section at the end of the presentation. When you are presenting, asking questions, please make sure that you unmute and share a video whenever possible so we can have the best stakeholder experience getting to know the other professionals in our area. A couple of housekeeping items. A lot of this morning is going to be focused on the lab and water system relationship and how you all interact with the TCEQ. So thank you to all of your lab stakeholders who are attending this morning. We really appreciate it. As you can see from the agenda that we sent out earlier this month, actually I believe it was last month, there is also a standalone lab stakeholder group this afternoon that is going to be starting at 1:30 and hopefully ending around 4 o'clock-ish. And the intent behind that is to make sure that some of those really nitty-gritty questions that you as laboratories need related to your data, related to the QAPP, etc., you can have an open discussion with us and have some presentations that are very specific to labs. This morning, we're going to be talking on a much higher level so that the water system knows what you're doing for them and what they are doing for you and how we all interact as a group. So thank you all very much for attending this morning. It looks like we have some people joining us still. We're about 100 people in. So hopefully as people join up, they are aware of some of our functionality and how we're moving forward. With that said, I'd like to go ahead and kick it off this morning. The first segment, hopefully from about 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock, is going to be introductions and program updates to keep you up to speed on what we're doing here at TCEQ to hopefully assist your programs out there and also let you know what's going on in the industry as a whole. Our first updates are going to be from Shannon Watson in the operational licensing group. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my presentation and let Shannon take care of it. Shannon, if you wouldn't mind going ahead, I will spotlight you so everybody should be able to see your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hope y'all are doing well. Give me just 1 second to get my notes up. So many buttons to click these days. Good morning. I hope everyone is having a good new year so far. For those of you who may not have met me, my name is Shannon Watson, and I am the section manager for the occupational licensing section. We are the ones who issue the water, wastewater, and multiple other occupational licenses for the state of Texas. I don't have a lot of updates. I do have a couple, but I don't think it will take me terribly long. And then if you have any questions afterwards, I'll be happy to answer those. First, I wanted to kind of give you an update on licenses. So I know many of you were probably in, in previous DWAWG meetings, and so you know that we, when COVID started last March, we gave people extensions on their license expirations for 30 days, and we had a greater level of flexibility than previously for additional extensions. Part of that was because continuing education programs were not available except in person, which was not an option with the COVID threat. So we now have over 150 courses that have been transitioned to online courses, and we're approving more and more every day. Our training providers have really stepped up and made that available. So as a result, additionally, we also have computer-based testing centers have reopened, and so there are those centers available across most of the state, the majority of the state. As a result, we don't have a blanket extension for any licenses expiring at this point. You can get your applications in. You can keep track online on our webpage, and you can notify us when deficiencies are resolved, either by calling us or by sending an email to our licenses website, email, excuse me. If you have an extenuating circumstance, we ask that you do send an extension request. We are granting them on a case-by-case basis. And we confer with there's a group who looks at it, and we make that decision. We have to find a new normal, and so right now we are working to get back to what this new normal is, which is looking at extensions. We're still offering a higher level of flexibility. We recognize that COVID has disrupted all of our lives. So help us to work with you by doing your best to get your applications in to renew and get new licenses in a timely manner. Along those lines, our application numbers are back to actually even slightly higher than they were before we went home to work from home. And so we are starting to see a greater backlog. That is also partly due to the fact that we are down 2 staff. We have 2 vacancies currently. We're hoping to get those filled in the next month or 2. But what the result is, while our staff are working as hard and as fast as they can, there is a bit longer processing time. So I recommend, if you have to renew your license, we ask that you submit it at least 45 days before the license expires. And in the rule, you can submit it as early as 90 days before the expiration. So if you can stay on top of that and help us, then we can help you by continuing to work through our license applications as quickly as we can. We do process applications as we receive them. So right now everyone is backed up a little bit. And as a result, if you submit your application a week or 2 before your license expires, it is unlikely that it will get processed before your expiration date. I'm not saying that to be mean. I just want y'all to be aware of it. Okay, so that's sort of the bad part of my updates. The good part of my updates is that as of last year, I believe it was October, the Water A exam is available on computer-based testing. We have had several people take it already. What we've done is removed the essays that were on it previously and replaced them with questions. There are now 100 questions on the exam rather than the 50 that were there before with the essays. It still covers all the information that's provided in the training, and so that's available now across the state at any CBT center. And if I can put the link that I'm mentioning in the chat after my updates. Additionally, since the Water A exam is on CBT, we have put our paper exams on hold. We did start offering paper exams for those license exams that were not available on computer-based testing. However, when there was a surge in COVID cases, right after a couple weeks after Thanksgiving, our management decided that, well, we all decided that it would be the best safety precautions to go ahead and put them on hold for a couple of months. So January and February, there will be no paper exams offered. And then in March, we will revisit being able to offer, with limited capacity, some paper exams. We have been working very hard to get all of our exams on computer-based testing availability. And so when we offer the paper exams, the only tests that will be available will be those that you cannot take on computer-based testing. And right now, those include the wastewater A, which is on our list to shift to CBT as quickly as we can, and then Spanish versions of all the exams. We have a couple of others, the irrigator license exam and the site evaluator for OSSF exams are managed by, or are offered by TEACS, because there is a hands-on component that we are unable to facilitate at our Austin office. So we are also looking at possibilities for getting those on CBT, and that will be in the works, and I'll provide updates as we have those moving forward. My last thing is that we currently have at least 9 new computer-based testing centers that are in progress right now to get an agreement with us to offer our exams. And the most exciting thing is that several of these are in the lower Panhandle, Lubbock area, which is the only area that has not had a computer-based testing center available. So once those are up, they will be posted on our CBT website, and there will be a little, one of those little new icons next to it. I'm hoping that will be in the next couple of months, and at that point, we will have computer-based testing centers for all our exams across the state, multiple centers in every region. So that's very exciting and should make upgrading licenses and getting new licenses simpler for everyone, since you won't have to find a location far from where you are. So really, that is all. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. And if there aren't any questions, then I hope you can all stay safe, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Shannon. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Here we go. We actually have a question from Nicholas Cook. Of the people who have taken the new Water A on CBT, how is the pass rate compared to the past tests?
That is a really good question. And so the pass rate, as we expected, the pass rate has fallen. And so the exam, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to say this without sounding accusatory. The previous exam had been the exam for many years, and the essays had been on the exam for many years. And as such, just word of mouth gets out, so people recognized what content they needed to be prepared for. As I said, this exam has the same content, but it does have new questions because the essays are no longer there. And so, as we expected, the pass rate has gone down. I don't have the specific numbers, like the percentages, and we have not really had, at the time we did our analysis, we had less than 100 people that had taken the exam, and so it wasn't really a representative sample large enough to be able to make an analysis, an accurate analysis. What I can tell you is that we are analyzing the exam, which allows us to see which questions may be problematic for everyone. So for example, if there is a question that nobody is answering correctly, we'll reevaluate that question and work on the exam. It was time for a review of it, and we're expecting over time, and we'll work to make sure the exam is adequate enough over time that we can get back up to the pass rate that we expect.
Thank you. There's another question here from Timothy Sanford. Are there any intentions to offer the computer-based exams at no additional cost?
So the agreement that we enter into with computer-based testing centers is, for us, we do not charge a fee, but part of the agreement is that because they are separate entities and we don't manage them, often they're college campuses, they're college testing centers. As a result, they set their own fees. And so we expect that they will charge a reasonable fee, but it varies anywhere from, I think the lowest one might be $20 or $25 up to, I think, closer to $50. And so, so based on that, we don't really have any control to say there's no additional cost. If there is a financial need, I would recommend talking to the local CBT centers and see if they can do.
Thank you very much. Those are all the questions I'm seeing right now. Shannon, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Sure thing.
Folks, Shannon, you needed to leave to a meeting soon, correct?
I'll be sticking around. Oh, sorry, I just exited my spotlight, but I'll be sticking around for a little bit, but I do have to go take care of some other stuff. The chat does come up for me, even if I'm not in the meeting. So if additional questions come up, if you put them in the chat, I should be around to be able to answer them as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Thank you for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Y'all have a great week. Michelle, you're muted.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate that. Our one item of housekeeping before we move on to our next set of updates. There are two separate links, one for the morning meeting this morning and a separate link for the lab stakeholder group this afternoon. If by any chance you have a lab colleague you are expecting to have attend and you don't see them in the attendance list, you might want to send them a quick text to let them know that they should be following the link that is at the top of the agenda. Or go ahead and send them the link if you are in the chat function. I'm sorry, in the participants functionality, you can copy the join info and send it to them through Teams pretty quickly. All right. Thank you guys very much. Thank you for your updates, Shannon. And let's go ahead and kick this over to Alfonso Fuentes in OCE for an update on what's going on in our field offices. Hey, we're getting garbled audio for you. It's the same still. Okay, let's see if we, yeah, maybe without the, no, that's the same still. Okay, my apologies, folks. We did do a dry run of this and everybody sounded like a regular human being. Let's see. I guess we can go ahead and move on to Joel and see if by any chance we can try and troubleshoot what might be going on with Al in the interim. Joel, are you ready?
Yes, Michelle, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You sound good. I'll switch over to you.
Great. Hey, Al, just a suggestion. You might try leaving the Teams meeting and joining again. I don't know if that'll have any impact on your audio or not. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joel Klump. I'm manager of the Plan and Technical Review section in our Water Supply Division. Happy New Year. Just a couple updates from the Plan and Technical Review section this morning. And Michelle, just a heads up that I just saw Ruth Takeda's hand go up. But continuing with updates for the plan and technical review section, as we've done in previous DWAWG meetings, there are details about section activities that can be found in the DWAWG program updates. And those program updates are accessible through the DWAWG webpage. A quick reminder that submittals may be sent in electronically for things like plans and specifications or exceptions, CT studies, other submittals that are routinely received and processed by my section. And that is at our email, which is ptrs@tceq.texas.gov. That's spelled out clearly in the program updates document. I do want to talk a little bit about the needs survey. I spoke about this at the last DWAWG meeting. Since the last meeting, the survey has been released by the EPA and data collection began on January 1st of this year. TCEQ is charged with gathering information about the 40 medium water systems that are included in the current needs survey. And to that purpose, we have made assignments to our FMT assistance contractors to contact those water systems and assist them in gathering the information for the survey. TCEQ staff are also available for assistance with completion of the survey. And with that, let me turn things over to Dorothy Young, who is a member of the response and capacity development team within my section. Dorothy's going to talk this morning to give us some updates about capacity development and TWIC. Dorothy, are you out there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, good morning. I'm here to talk about two things, two items. There's a lot of new people on the call, so I will talk a little bit about what TWIC is before telling you about the next meeting. TWIC stands for the Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Committee. We're a group of regulatory, funding, and assistance providing agencies and organizations who meet every other month, and we're trying to be a clearinghouse for water and wastewater systems who are looking for funding and other kinds of assistance. So we come together, and now, of course, virtually. Different agency hosts the meetings every other month. This month, the meeting is on January 20th, and it'll be hosted by Communities Unlimited, which is an assistance providing agency organization and also has a small loan program. Folks are invited to get on the agenda. You can do that by contacting me, and there's information in the notes on how to reach me. And then you can come and now by phone and say, well, I'm looking for funding because I need to do this project or that project. And I just was curious which of these agencies would be best for me to work with. And so we can talk about that. There's a lot of good information about the group at twic.org, TWICC.org. And like I said, if you have any questions about us, the TWIC doesn't have money itself, but what we do is we provide information and sort of brainstorm with folks who are unsure on how to proceed. And sometimes you have to patchwork funding, like get some money from Texas Department of Agriculture and some from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and so on and so forth. So we can also talk about providing assistance. AWWA is part of it, Rural Water Association, and other organizations that provide assistance to water systems. And my second announcement is we started last year a new category of our recognition program for the Drinking Water Recognition Program. And I put the link in the notes. This one is called Water Partners, Water Systems Helping Water Systems. We're interested in finding out what kind of partnerships are going on around the state, whether it's mentoring or emergency response or helping with training or sharing equipment. And you can nominate yourself or someone else. And all the information is on that webpage. And then there's other categories too, if you're interested. So those are all my announcements. Any questions, Michelle?
I am not seeing any in the chat function, so I think we're good. So if you guys have any questions for Joel or for Dorothy, please feel free to put those in the chat functionality. We can revisit them later in the presentation. So thank you very much, Dorothy. We appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and try to get Al back on again. Thank you.
Hi, Michelle, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you, sir. You sound just normal, which is great.
Okay, good. I don't have a whole lot since the last time that I updated DWAWG. Continue to conduct investigations. It turns out that instead of going strictly virtual with getting photographs and diagrams and things like that from the water systems, the investigators are doing kind of a hybrid where they get as much as they can from the water systems to conduct their investigation and determine compliance. And then those few items that they cannot or are not sure of, they go ahead and make every effort to go out to the water system and with all the precautions for COVID and conduct an investigation there and then wrap it up that way. It looks like everybody's doing that. Each region has their own discretion as to how they handle these investigations. We are currently prepping an inventory of how many water systems we have to investigate and when they're going to be due. We have like a universe for each region that we're getting ready for them. Also, we're preparing for biennial training for the investigators. We're trying as hard as we can to keep on track with that. The Public Water Supply Committee is trying to schedule that so that hopefully with the vaccine rollout, we can do it face to face. So they're trying to schedule it later in the summer. And we have committees that are formed to assist the investigators whenever they have issues, as well as statewide issues. And so each of those committees, the ones that I am liaison for are the water rights, surface water quality monitoring, and public water system committees. Each one of those committees is preparing presentations to present to our steering committee and for the purpose of just finding out how they're doing, what challenges they're facing, and if they need any assistance. I think that's all I had that we're working on. We're fast and furious, but didn't have a whole lot since the last time. Michelle, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Al. As of right now, not seeing anything in the chat as far as question goes, but once again, if you have anything for Al, please feel free to shoot it in there. We'll return during another presentation or during another break. Okay, well, after Al is myself, so go ahead and share with y'all real quick. I don't have too terribly much to cover with y'all this morning because a lot of the content we have during our presentations are very much drinking water standards issues. That is not the right one. Never mind. But what I wanted to discuss with you guys this morning was the fact that we have been blessed with a new rule. So the DWAWG last year, we did mention that we were going to have a lead and copper rule revision, and that the proposed rule had been published back in October of 2019. Well, in December of 2020, we have been given the full pre-publication version of the rule, and that is going to be out there and available for all of you to see. So we would go ahead and encourage you to take a look at that. To let you know the things that are available, the EPA has a website, which I'll include the link in the chat functionality, that they provided quite a few materials to try and assist you moving forward. So let's see, sorry, it looks like somebody has accidentally shared their screen. There we go. Hopefully I've got that taken care of. So the pre-publication date was the 22nd. The EPA website includes the rule language itself. The presentation that they put out is about 400 pages, so it is a lot. Be ready to take a look through it or look through it specifically for things you are interested in. They have tried to condense that down and that condensation. Sorry, folks, I just got noticed that we're still viewing Judith's screen, so try to figure out how to control that from here. Judith, if you could do an exit screen so that you aren't sharing.
How do I do it?
There should be an X in your bar at the top, all the way right next to the leave button. There is your share screen, and you should be able to click that with an X, and it should kill your share screen.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So, as I said, the full rule language is out there. They've also tried to make it more digestible by putting out fact sheets and then infographics. Some of those infographics will really help based on who you are. If you're a small system, they have a small system infographic that I think is called like Hometown USA. There's also a larger one for the bigger municipalities and cities. And then there's also a quick infographic that's supposed to kind of tout the health benefits of the new rule in comparison to the previous rule. For all of you who are public water systems attending this morning, the public water system reference guide, or it's technically called the reference guide for public water systems, is probably a good option for you to take a look at and get the gist of what the rule is without going through all 400 pages to begin with. And then, of course, there is a video recording of a virtual event they had to basically bring people up to speed on the pre-publication version of the rule. So this is to let you know it's out there, to let you know that we are in the process of digesting it, probably just like a lot of you are. If you haven't had a chance to do that, I would highly suggest you take an opportunity to get into that and read through it and become familiar with the rule. During our next DWAWG, which is going to be scheduled for April of this year, I would highly encourage you to be familiar with it, because we're intending to make that a big portion of our the focus of our next DWAWG in April. So let's go ahead and go from there to say that we have Joel coming up next. I'm sorry, Stephen coming up next. Stephen, if you are ready to share your updates for the special functions section.
I am. See if we can. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year to you all. I just have a few announcements, things that I'd like to make sure that everybody's aware of. One is that as I mentioned in our last WOG, that PHS fees the invoices have been sent, and so those are due. For the regulatory assessment fees, those are due by the end of January. So if you've got any questions about that, please let us know. Otherwise, you can call our main telephone number and be referred to the public health service fees or the fees personnel, and they will help you. That telephone number is 512-239-4691. Additionally, I just wanted to remind folks that we are now accepting our public notices, the certificate of delivery via email. The image or the document needs to be signed and scanned and sent to that email. It's PWSPN, and same for boil water notices. Those can be sent to PWSBWN. That's all I have for today. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Go ahead and stop spotlighting. And then I did have one thing I want to share with you guys. Let me make sure I can actually get it shared. Sorry for the delay. So I did want to thank you all for attending, and as I indicated, we have a great set of data to get across to you guys today about the lab interactions. And we do kind of have the next DWAWG slated to discuss the lead and copper rule revisions, but we are very open to any other items you guys might want to discuss, things that are important to you out in the field or out in the practical application of complying with drinking water regulations. Please feel free to reach out to us. The DWAWG email address is presented here. We are very interested in any presentation requests you may have. And as I indicated, our next meeting is going to be scheduled for April of 2021. So please feel free to reach out to us and provide those suggestions you may have. During this time period, as I indicated, the lead and copper rule, I did share the link in the chat functionality, so you have that. And there is about a bit of information out there. So if you can, be up to speed on your take on that, we'll be very interested, hopefully, in having a robust discussion during our next DWAWG meeting. And then I also wanted to let you guys know that we are working very hard to make sure that we can respond to any concerns you all have in a timely fashion. And we do have phones running live, and we are providing voicemails to different people and trying to call you back as soon as and as quickly as we can. But to try and support that, we've also made sure that we have a lot of program-specific email boxes. And I wanted to go ahead and give you guys this. These are our proxy boxes in the drinking water standards section. These are a lot of the people where whenever you have the need to talk to a program area, you don't have a specific person's name or a specific person's phone number, send us an email to these sites. They are all being looked at by multiple people on the program, so they should be able to get back to you very quickly. So the SWTR or sweater box is going to take you to the surface water treatment rule program area, and someone who works on the surface water treatment rule will get back to you. Also, for those of you who are choosing to submit your electronic copy of the SWMOR to make sure that it gets here, even though you're mailing your hard copy, we can give you the benefit of the doubt as to your submission date based on when you send us your PDF through the sweater email box. For those of you, sorry, Craig Harvey, I saw that you had a graphic. What graphic are you not able to see the screen, or what issue are you having?
Michelle, it looks like the presentation is on the final slide and not the slide that you're talking about.
So you can't see a proxy box slide?
No, it's on the thank you for attending slide.
Huh.
Oh, that's weird because I see the proxy box slide.
Oh, so different people are seeing different things. Okay, so I will make sure that this gets up for people to take a look at. I'll verbally go through these proxy boxes, and hopefully that'll be recorded for posterity, and then I can provide these proxy boxes to you all to make sure everybody knows what they are. My apologies, it looks like different people are seeing different slides. So the next one is going to be DVP. Obviously, this is for disinfection byproducts, but also if you're trying to reach anyone about OELs or the DLQR, or you're letting us know that you're doing a free chlorine conversion, this is a great box to have available and get a hold of somebody very quickly. Also, if you're doing a free chlorine conversion and have downstream customers, I would very much appreciate it if you were able to reach out to us beforehand, and we can have a conversation about how to potentially coordinate better with your downstream customers to get the most out of those free chlorine conversions. It looks like we're still having trouble with the thanks for the slide, so I'm going to go ahead and unshare and try sharing again and see if that improves. So apologies for the delays, folks. Try to get things correct, or as best as we can for you. Okay, it keeps not sharing properly, so I'm assuming I have an issue on my end. My apologies for that. I will go ahead and share all these proxy boxes in the chat format, so that way you do have them for your posterity. But we really do have a way to reach out to every rural area. So this would be the fastest way to get to in writing to us that you're trying to talk to us and we're trying to get back to you as quickly as possible. You'll also get an auto reply from these boxes, so that way if you are needing to indicate that you did reach out to us, you have something for your records that you have actually been in contact with us. One of the ones that I really want to point out and make sure people are aware of is the public water system LCR, so PWS LCR. And that is meant for the lead and copper rule. So I've been getting a lot of emails lately, which, don't get me wrong, I love to get emails from you guys, but sometimes I'm just not the best person to help you because my program area knows exactly what your situation is. So if you are receiving letters from us right now about your lead and copper tap monitoring, or if you're receiving letters from us about the lead consumer notice, please go ahead and, if you can, reply to the PWS LCR to make sure that the program area can get back to you as quickly as possible. Sorry, it looks like we have somebody not on mute, so I'm going to go ahead and just mute everybody. And then last thing, Rick did ask if I could share this file tabs of the chat. This presentation needs to be checked for accessibility before it gets put out there, but yes, we can later share it. And all of these are going to be available on the DWAWG website itself. So as you go forward, the presentations you see today will also be available on the DWAWG page at the TCEQ. Okay. All right. So last update we have this morning is going to be Jessica Hoke with the Quality Assurance Project Plan, or the Quality Assurance Officer for our program area. So go ahead, Jessica.
All right. Oh, goodness. Hello, can y'all hear me?
I can see and hear you.
Okay, good. Well, my name is Jessica Hoke, and as Michelle stated, I am the Quality Assurance Specialist for the public. Man, all of these technological things got me all off kilter. For the Public Water System Supervision Program. Wow, that is a mouthful that I could not find there for a second. My apologies. So I'm here to provide y'all not with a program update as a program manager, like you've heard from some of the previous people, but a QA update just from the quality assurance perspective. So I just want to start by saying a huge thank you to all of the work that y'all have been doing in working to make improvements in the data integrity of your documentation, for your lead and copper tap sampling, for your water quality parameters, for all of the work that y'all are doing, public water systems for RTCR and all of that stuff. I do want to let everybody know that going forward in 2021, one of the main focuses that I'll be taking is a focus on reporting. And so that'll be something that we'll be working closely with laboratories to ensure that they're meeting the requirements for reporting for public water systems to stay in compliance, but also addressing any issues that might be coming up on the public water system side as well. So just wanted to put it out there that reporting will be a big focus for the upcoming year. And for any laboratories that are here in attendance, I'd also like to extend a big thank you for all of the work that y'all have been doing in accommodating your clients and figuring out ways to still get the data here to the TCEQ, even though you might not have been able to, put your microbial reporting forms in the mail in the way that you normally would have. So I think y'all are doing a really great job in a very unusual year, to say the least. So if there are any labs in the audience, I really hope to see you this afternoon at the laboratory stakeholder meeting. It'll be a little bit less formal. We do have some presentations related to E2 reporting that Lee will be giving, and then I'll be there to answer any questions that y'all might have related to the QAPP. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Jessica. We really appreciate it. Just so you guys know, as Jessica indicated, we're really trying to focus on getting high quality data through on time in the best way possible. Make sure that any violations or compliance determinations we make are based on really good data and are representative of your water system. That's basically our goal. So a lot of the content we're going to be sharing this morning, and then also discussing in depth during the lab stakeholder group this afternoon, is really focused on that goal. It's about making sure that we get what you guys are doing in the field documented correctly and transmitted with fidelity, so that way what we're saying is true and we have good chain of understanding and high data integrity to make those decisions on. So please continue to tune in this morning. We would like to go ahead and take a break to start right again at 10 o'clock in case people are trying to follow based on the agenda. We don't want to go ahead and start before they were planning to tune in for the 10 a.m. discussion on microbial data. So go ahead and if you can take I guess it's about a 12-minute break at this point, and we'll see you guys again at 10 a.m. Okay, folks, we are approaching 10 o'clock. I did see that we have some new people join us, hopefully to attend some of these presentations about microbial and chlorine compliance and monitoring. So I did want to let those folks know that we are recording this for a later presentation on the TCEQ's YouTube channel. So just be aware that you are being recorded. Also, matters of housekeeping. If you have a question or a concern, you can at any time add it into the chat functionality. At the top toolbar, it's going to look like a instant message bubble. If you click on that, you'll be able to enter a chat just like you would send a text message. Otherwise, if you're interested in asking a question up front or by voice, please feel free to raise your hand. The raise your hand feature is looking like a hand, and it's in the upper toolbar right next to the chat functionality. And I can see who's raising their hand in what order and call on you. If at any point in time you are being called on and you are sharing, please feel free to share your audio and your video so that we can have the best interaction possible in a virtual environment. And then also, if you could, when you are not talking or when you are not presenting or asking a question, if you can keep your audio and video off so we have as few distractions as possible. All right. Thank you to everyone who was here this morning and is back joining us, and thank you to everyone who has decided to join us this morning at 10 a.m. I'm going to go ahead and get started into our program presentations. Specifically, this next hour is going to be related to the microbial reporting. I'm going to start off with a really high-level discussion of the roles and responsibilities related to micro. So, this is a partnership. Public water systems are going to be the ones taking these samples. TCEQ is going to be the one checking to make sure that those samples are compliant and that you take the right amount in the right places. And then, of course, the labs are actually going to be the ones analyzing them. So from beginning to end, we kind of need to get an idea of who's doing what. And regrettably, we've come to find out that there's been a little bit of misunderstanding regarding who's responsible for what in the process. So I'm going to go ahead and try and walk us through the major steps of the process from beginning to end and let people know what their role is and what their professional responsibility is throughout the process. As always, our goal is to protect public health by improving compliance and communication, and specifically in this case, communication related to microbial reporting and monitoring. So the rule. TCEQ has primary responsibility for the rule. We do the rule writing, we check for compliance to the rule, we make rule interpretations when the need arises if the rule is unclear. We do also offer assistance to help you understand what the rule is. If you get into a new situation you've never been in before, we are there to talk with you on the phone. We have a lot of options. We can even offer virtual FMT visits or in-person FMT visits with certain safety precautions during this time. We also go through a lot of effort to provide regulatory guidances to assist you in doing these things. So, just to give you an idea, we have a flow chart that helps you understand how to do your repeat sampling. We have a very bulleted version of how to complete our forms correctly. We just have a lot of things written out there to try and help you be able to comply with our rules. And we love to get those out to as many people as possible to help as many people as possible. If we're missing something, which occasionally has come to our attention, for instance, we didn't have that flow chart of how to do repeats before. We are very interested in what the regulatory community needs, and we will work to fulfill that need. Obviously, the public water system is the one who actually is going to need to comply with them. If you read through our rule, it never says that the TCEQ is going to do something other than on the compliance side. And it doesn't actually say that the lab is going to meet a reporting deadline or anything like that. It says a public water system shall. So the buck stops with the public water system. It's their responsibility to know the rules and to operate within them. Then with the labs, they need to know the rules well enough that they can help their clients, and they also need to know our quality assurance project plan requirements to ensure that they're meeting those requirements and those obligations as a laboratory. So nothing works well if you haven't set yourself a solid foundation. So a lot of setting up for success with the water system is making sure that you know what you need to do and you've put those things in place to give your sampler and your system the best chance to do things correctly and safely and have it be representative of your system. So know the rules, and they need to place all monitoring and reporting requirements on the system. Just like I said, it says the public water system shall. So know those rules. Part of that is having your sample siting plan. So for the revised total coliform rule, you'll need to know not only where you take your original sites, but I highly suggest that you know exactly where you take your repeat sites. Not only that, but make sure that you have more than one repeat site available. The number of assessments that I have looked at that were triggered because people said, well, I tried to go to this repeat site, but it's the only one I had, and it wasn't a good site, so I took it there. Give yourself multiple options. So that way, if you go to the first site and they've, decided that they're going to start raising 10 dogs in their backyard right by the sampling point, you can choose another one that's more representative, more accurate to what your water system actually looks like. We also want to set you up for success by having a sample collection SOP. So, like I said, we've developed a lot of assistive documents. We do have a template SOP that you can use, but I would highly encourage you to have your own. That SOP should set clear expectations. It should document safeguards that your sampler should take to ensure the best possible representative sample. And we would highly, like I said, add the details that are your system and are specific to your system. Unfortunately, I also find that very often people don't follow that SOP, even though they have one, and that leads to issues down the road. So make sure that training happens. So the next item there, sample collection personnel. First of all, be aware that sample collection staff should be appropriately trained on the SOP. As I said, the SOP means nothing if people don't know what it is and they don't follow it, but they should also be licensed appropriately. Basically, a water system taking bacteriological samples is considered to be a process control duty. Process control duties are something that are required of licensed personnel, and the only exception to that really is going to be a transient non-community system where the person sampling is either the owner or a direct employee of the owner. And then also setting up for success, select a lab partner. Just so you guys know, we have over 100 water laboratories that are capable of doing bacteriological testing, microbial testing, and submitting samples to us. They are NELAP approved. Quite a few of them have signed our letters of adherence. You can choose whomever you want. So if you have a lab that is not being responsive to you, if you have a lab that doesn't do things in the way that you want, that doesn't work within your process, that just hasn't worked with you well in the past, you can always look for a different partner. They are an agent to your success, and it's a cooperative, professional relationship. So choose someone that will contribute to your success. As a water system and as a laboratory, we have to be on top of the equipment. The equipment is only as good as what we, first of all, check in the first place, pick the right stuff, but also it's about maintenance. It's about keeping those things in a good working order. So public water system, choose a good chlorine analysis meter. If it tells you that you have sufficient chlorine, but really it's not reading accurately, that's a disservice to you and your people. You may have a positive BAC-T, even though you think you've taken a good chlorine residual in the field. You should have a good sampling collection kit. Like I said, make sure that you disinfect that equipment. Make sure that you have the disinfectant equipment to clean the tap before your sample. Make sure you have a clean cooler. Make sure you have ice packs. Set yourself up for success by having the right equipment to treat that sample well. That sample has a lot of consequences if it doesn't turn up correctly. You want to make sure that that data is true and accurate, so you take appropriate steps. And then, of course, the lab. The lab does a lot on your behalf that you may not be aware of as a water system. For instance, the sample bottles. They don't just decide any old sample bottle will do. This sample bottle has to go through a lot of quality control steps. So just to give you an idea, they have to check for the accuracy of the 100 milliliter line mark. They have to check that the powder, pillow, or pill that's in there is sufficient to dechlorinate at specific chlorine levels. They also have to check for sterility. Sterility is the most important thing. If bacteria are already in there, then you've defeated the purpose of the test. So they're going to go through and check for sterility. These are very important things that you want to make sure that your lab is choosing good materials, because it's also setting you up for success. Lab-specific forms. Your labs also have the ability to create a lab-specific form. And the more you understand their form, what they're looking for on it, and how it aligns with our microbial reporting form, our MRF that's required, making sure that it is an approved form, those things will set you up for success because you're less likely to have documentation errors. And then finally, last thing on here is a third-party sampler. If by any chance you choose to have somebody else, either the laboratory or some other party, collect samples on your behalf, do you ever check up behind them? Do you know that you set them up for success? Do they know what your sample siting plan is? Are they taking things in the right place? If they take it on your behalf, they submit it on your behalf, the consequences are also yours. So please make sure that you're checking up behind any third-party sampler you may have. Like I said, talking collection, make sure they're licensed, make sure they follow the SOP. If there's any doubt, do some sort of corrective action. Pull a special sample. If you don't feel like this is accurate to what you'd expect in that representative portion of your system, please take a chance to really look at it before you submit it as a routine or distribution sample. I regularly see in assessments that people say, I just was going there, I did it, this is what I do every month. I didn't realize that there was construction on the street. But they go back when the repeats need to be taken, they go, oh wow, there's construction right there. If you'd taken the time to really step back and see the construction on your initial journey, you wouldn't have needed to go and take repeat samples. So slow down, think about it, be present every time you take a sample. Also, concurrent documentation. Concurrent is just a fancy word for write it when you do it. As soon as you do something, write it down. By having that, you're more likely to have accurate records, complete records. A very common reason for rejection is not having an essential piece of data. If you write it down as soon as you do it, chances of having incomplete documentation are significantly lower. And once again, third-party sampler. Do you know how they're doing it? Do you trust in their technique? We audit ours regularly. I would highly suggest that you audit yours regularly. Transportation. So a sample's been taken. You need to get it to the lab. Who's responsible for that? It's a partnership. It's both the public water system and the laboratory. So public water system, if you can, I would highly recommend you drop it off. You're actually physically giving that custody to the laboratory. You've seen it go into their hands, and chances are you're walking away with a chain of custody that says the lab is now responsible. If you have to send it by a courier or a shipper, check up on them. UPS is good, FedEx is good, Lone Star, XYZ Corporation. They may have good reputations, but that doesn't mean they always get there on time. If you have a tracking number, follow up on your tracking number. Just because you've sent it off doesn't mean it actually gets there. Unfortunately, we have seen some be lost in transit. So be on top of that. If you submit it today, check tomorrow, because tomorrow's when it's supposed to get there. And once again, whenever possible, keep your chain of custody. When the laboratory actually receives your sample, whether you're dropping it off or whether you had a courier send it, they should be able to produce a chain of custody that they received. And labs, of course, do keep your chain of custodies. Provide that documentation. Make sure that you keep track of when you actually took ownership and responsibility for the sample. And for those of you who don't know, as water systems, under the NELAP requirements, they are required to keep transmittal documents. So they should have the shipping papers from FedEx, UPS, whomever you choose to ship with in their records. So you can also see when whenever the courier actually got to the laboratory and moved that responsibility over. Acceptability. Sometimes a sample is not acceptable. What I suggest you as a water system do is to know your lab's policy. Under the NELAP requirements, the National Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program, they have to have a lab acceptability or a sample acceptability policy. So know your policy. There are some minimums, but laboratories can be more stringent. They can say it differently. They can have different processes for checking acceptability. So know your lab's policy. And also remedy any issues you have before relinquishing. A very common mistake is to have an incomplete microbial reporting form, especially right now with COVID. Sometimes you're not doing a face-to-face transfer. You might be leaving it on a table outside. You want to make sure that you are double checking your paperwork, because that is the last opportunity to fix many of these problems and still have the sample be acceptable. So water system, slow down, take a second, third check, have the sampler do it, have somebody else review it, have a crew leader review it, have the city secretary review it. Make sure those things are right. Laboratory, document and communicate your policy. The more people know your policy, the more likely they are to follow it. Have it blatantly available in your check-in area, in your drop-off area. Make sure that people know what your policies are, and more importantly, follow your policy. Unfortunately, we've had to issue some corrective actions lately for people having a policy, but failing to follow it. Once again, I know that you check in probably dozens, sometimes hundreds of samples a day, but if you can slow down and really look at each one, give it that dedicated time at check-in, a lot of issues can be avoided. Analysis, obviously, the lab is very, very responsible for analysis. They're the ones who actually do that method and give you a result. They have a lot of responsibilities, water system. They have to be in compliance with the TNI standard. They have to be in compliance with the Drinking Water Cert Manual. And we've also asked them to follow our quality assurance project plan. Those systems that have chosen to go through the checklist and document their adherence are posted on our website. So like I said, you can choose any partner you want, but you might want to see if they've gone that extra mile to adhere to our QAPP requirements, show their dedication to complying with the public water system requirements. And of course, not only do they have to have the administrative functions in place, but they also have to have the method adherence in place. They have to have the process and the procedures and the quality control that are outlined in the standard method or whichever method they are choosing that they're accredited for. And then they also have to make sure that the equipment, personnel, and documentation are taken care of. So unfortunately, on a regular basis, I hear water systems tell me that their lab messed up. Their lab has to document a really large number of things. They have to document every temperature, every piece of equipment, the calibration of that equipment, the personnel who checked it in, ran it, resolved it, reviewed it, okayed it for reporting. All that stuff needs to be written down. Before indicating that you're having a lab problem, I would highly suggest that you communicate with the lab and check behind them to see if they have these things, if they're following their processes and procedures. Results communication. This is very important to us. It's everybody's involved. So first of all, sample rejection and replacement. If a sample needs to be rejected for some reason, it was broken in transit, it was leaking, it had high heterotrophic growth, somehow it froze in transit. There are lots of reasons something could need rejected. The lab needs to inform the public water system as soon as possible, and the public water system needs to resubmit within 24 hours. If by any chance there's a positive result, the lab should communicate to both the public water system and the TCEQ as soon as possible. When needed, TCEQ coordinates and educates. So your laboratory will tell us, did they contact you? But we'll follow up to see, do you know how to take repeats? Do you know where you're supposed to take your repeats? Do you need any assistance on how to mark those correctly? We can provide you forms to show you how to do it right. Unfortunately, you can trigger an assessment by failing to take repeats or taking repeats improperly. So we very much have been focusing on educating people on coordinating those repeats and triggered source monitoring requirements. And then of course, the PWS needs to resubmit within 24 hours. Result transmission. So the lab creates a result. You as a water system might find out the next day that your BACT is good, but how in the world do we know that? So the results need to be in by the 10th. In this case, as I said, the rules actually say the water system should submit. The lab is actually acting as an agent on your behalf in this instance. So although we can provide assistance, we provide resources and guidance and data assistance on using steers, on using E2, the lab is actually the one creating it. They're the ones who's developing a CSV file for upload through the E2 system, and they submit it to us. They also can get an error report, so it's their responsibility to troubleshoot and resolve any submission errors as soon as possible. But you as the water system are still the one who actually has to meet the requirement of getting these in on time. So I highly suggest that you confirm that those results are present in Drinking Water Watch. If you regularly see that your laboratory is not getting those in by the deadline of the 10th, so you wake up on the 11th, you go in there and you see they're not in there, that's a question of having a good relationship with them and making sure they're upholding their duties as your agent. Compliance determination. Most of this is us, so we do try to alleviate as much from you as we can. We try to do lab outreach to say, hey, you usually give us samples from XYZ. We don't see any samples from XYZ, or we only see 6 out of 7 or 9 out of 10. We try to reach out to the laboratory to see if by any chance we just missed a result. So we do try to do that before we ever issue any violations. We also follow up on any triggered things. So if you by any chance had a positive and you needed repeats, we check to make sure those repeats came in. If you had a groundwater positive and you needed to do triggers, we check to see whether the triggers came in. We also see, okay, you had a reject. Did a replacement come in? And then finally, we check to make sure, okay, did you request an invalidation? Is the invalidation something we can issue? If we did issue a violation, an invalidation, do you have sufficient samples to fulfill your requirements? So just as an FYI to folks, if a sample is invalidated, it doesn't count for you. Therefore, if you needed to take 10 and you want to get one invalidated, you actually need to take 11 to meet your minimum 10 requirement. And then finally, after we've done all those reviews and followed all the threads that we can, if we still see that you have not met the requirements of what was required from you, the number of routine samples, the number of repeat samples, getting the triggered source monitoring sample that you need to, that's when we would go to notices of violations or issuing of assessments. A couple of things that come up pretty regularly are the what ifs. So what if a lab misses the reporting deadline? Well, we do try to work with the laboratory. We like to give the water system the benefit of the doubt. But eventually, if the lab keeps missing the reporting deadline, we as the TCEQ will have to coordinate with the laboratory to have them do a corrective action as to why that's happening, because we want things to go as well as possible, as representative as possible for the public water system. What if the PWS meets the reporting deadline? If you took the sample outside of the month, so you realize on the 31st you didn't take a sample, you take it on the 1st, it cannot count for the previous month. So I want to make sure everybody knows that. It has to be taken within the monitoring period. If you take it in on the last day and you get the result in on the 1st of the next month, that's acceptable. If you take it on the 1st, it will not count for the previous month. A customer public water system has received an NOV in error. If you're the lab and you find out from the water system that they received an NOV in error, then we need to go down the hall of, okay, did we get the data from you? If we did, then maybe it really is just an oversight on our part. Sometimes data gets in after, later on, and we've missed it. We'll work to resolve that. We could potentially do a rejection of that error. However, if it was received in error because the data came in late, then that's when we have a discussion of, okay, we could potentially reject it for the public water system because they didn't own it, but you, as a water laboratory, need to be submitting on time on their behalf. And then same type of thing. If they receive an NOV because of late reporting, and then what happens if it's the lab that does the late reporting. So these are high-level roles and responsibilities of who's responsible for what. These are my contact information. And just to let you know, we are actively working on RG 421, trying to get it nice and clean and ready for agency communications. And you should hopefully see an updated RG coming in the near future. I'm about to hand this off to Jackie, but I wanted to go ahead and address the two emails, the two comments that I've seen thus far. Nicholas Cook asked if a PWS has to replace a rejected sample. Does it have to go to the same lab, or can it be sent to a secondary lab? The answer is you can choose the analysis wherever you like, but you do need to make sure that the paperwork is done correctly. So for instance, you'll need to know the originating reject number from your originating lab and include that properly on the MRF when submitting the replacement to the secondary lab. So there may need to be some coordination between your primary and secondary lab, or you need to provide that information. Like the primary lab sends you the report, you need to take the information off that report to fill out the MRF correctly. Jessica said, oh yeah, she already answered that for you. Sorry about that. And then, is there any leeway in the 24-hour deadline? For example, so the rule does not specifically allow for modifications. If it comes up and it's on Christmas Day and you can't get to a laboratory, that may be something that we could discuss. However, for the most part, if it's a business day and you can get to a laboratory, even if it's not your primary laboratory, if it's a secondary laboratory or whatever, and they're in business for that day, you really should go through everything you can to meet that 24-hour deadline, because that is what the rule intends. Okay? When updating the sample siting plan, do we have to send a copy to the RTCR group in addition to updating the monitoring plan? We would highly recommend it. The reason that we'd recommend it is because if you do have a positive and we have to offer assistance to you, or we're reviewing your assessment to make sure repeats are good, we're going to actively reference that plan. However, is it a requirement? If you are a surface water or GUI system, the requirement is that anytime you update your monitoring plan, of which the SSP is part, you do need to submit it to the TCEQ. For those that are groundwater only or purchase water only, there is a little more leniency and gray area in the rule. So either way, I highly recommend it, but is it an actual rule requirement? Yes, for sure, for the surface water and GUIs. Now, I think that some questions you may have coming up could actually be addressed in this next presentation. Jackie Hernandez is going to be presenting on the nuts and bolts of getting those micro samples in, the paperwork, and the reporting process with the laboratories. So let me go ahead and kick this over to Jackie.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Hernandez, and I work with the revised Total Coliform Rule Compliance Program. Today I'm going to be discussing how to be successful with the RTCR monitoring requirements. During this presentation, we will cover the following topics: how to successfully remain in compliance, the RTCR sample siting plan, the sampling standard operating procedure, sample collection, the microbial reporting form, relinquishing samples to the lab, reporting sample results to the TCEQ, common mistakes we see, and why accuracy matters. To successfully remain in compliance with the RTCR monitoring requirements, ensure you understand and complete the following. Know your sample schedule. This is the monthly minimum sample requirements and are based on population served. If you are a public water system that serves 4,900 people or less and use only purchased water or groundwater not under the direct influence of surface water, you may collect your samples on a single day if they are taken from different locations. Follow your SSP. Make sure it is accurate and up to date, and refer to it when you are planning where you will take your samples, especially when collecting repeats. Follow your sampling SOP. Make sure you read the SOP and follow it carefully to collect the samples correctly. Complete the MRF accurately. Make sure the writing is legible, complete all the required fields, and check it twice. Relinquish your samples to the lab in a timely manner. Make sure the lab has enough time to incubate the samples before the 30-hour holding time is over. Always check your sample results have been reported to TCEQ. Results are reported electronically and sometimes technology fails, so you need to follow through with your data to avoid any violations. Sample siting plan is required for all public water systems under the RTCR. It identifies routine and repeat sample sites within your distribution system. These sample sites must be representative of the water in the system. Make sure to include a map of the system along with a copy of your sampling SOP with your SSP. The SSP is meant to be a living document, so make sure to keep it updated as changes occur. Please keep a copy of your most recent sample siting plan on site for inspection purposes. Remember to use your SSP as a resource when completing your sampling requirements. The sampling SOP describes how samples should be collected. It should include instructions on tap disinfection, chlorine residual measurements, sample collection, MRF completion, and transport and relinquishment of samples. The SOP is a resource for the sample collector and will be reviewed by the RTCR staff during treatment technique assessments. Here are some tips for successful sample collection. Know what your system sample schedule is. Make sure you have enough supplies before heading out to the field, and try to keep at least 3 extra sample bottles on hand for unforeseen circumstances. Store your supplies properly by checking storage requirements, and always rotate through your stock to avoid using expired supplies. Follow your SSP and reference it when needing to collect repeat samples. Make sure you know your sampling SOP and keep a copy handy to reference when needed. Always sample in a timely manner, making sure you have enough time to get the sample to the laboratory before the 30-hour holding period time is over. Remember to document everything accurately, as mistakes can lead to violations. We have a video on how to collect samples and recommend that you watch it. You can view it by clicking here. The microbial reporting form, or MRF for short, is the TCEQ chain of custody paperwork for RTCR compliance samples. The MRF must be accurate and legible as it is used to transcribe data that is reported to the TCEQ. It includes the chlorine residual, which is a field reading. The samples listed on the MRF should match the sample sites listed in the SSP. This is important when issues come up, as we will review both the SSP and the MRF. The holding time is verified with the collection date and time and incubation time listed on the MRF. The lab uses the information listed on the MRF to report the system's data to the TCEQ. Therefore, it is very important to always double check the information on the MRF. We have a video on how to complete the MRF. The link to the video will open when you click here. This is a general MRF. The upper right-hand blank boxes will be where the lab information is listed. Most labs will have an MRF that has this same layout, but some labs have been approved to use a modified MRF if it still contains all the required information. Please use the MRF that is issued by your lab to submit your samples. The fields highlighted in green show the information for the PWS, PWS contact, and the samples. These fields can only be filled out by the PWS sample collector. The lab is not allowed to make any changes to these fields. The yellow field is where the originating sample information will be listed. This field will only be completed when the sample type is a repeat, replacement, or triggered source monitoring sample. This is the only field that the lab can modify on behalf of the PWS. The gray boxes are the fields that the lab must fill out. These include incubation time, which is used to determine if the sample was within the 30-hour hold time, and sample results. Make sure the MRF information is filled out legibly and accurately, as this information is used to report the compliance data to TCEQ. Now I want to go a little more in depth into the different sample types used for RTCR compliance. Let's start with routine samples. Who is required to collect these samples? All public water systems under the RTCR have a minimum sample schedule requirement that is based on the population served. When do they have to be collected? They must be collected every month as listed in your sample schedule and must be collected within that month. For example, a public water system is required to collect one sample per month starting in March. The PWS will have the entire month of March to collect that sample. However, if they forgot to do so and collect a sample on April 1st, that sample will not count towards March, but rather it will count towards April. Where should they be collected? Routine samples must be collected from the distribution system after treatment and must be representative of the water in the distribution system. Follow your SSP to ensure you are collecting the sample from the correct location. How are they marked on the MRF? These are marked as routine on the MRF under the sample type field. In this example MRF, Bobby is an operator that took a routine sample for Water Girl Inc. As you can see, the sample type is marked as routine only. This sample was collected on May 18, 2020, and will count towards May 2020 compliance for the RTCR. The sample location is a specific address. The chlorine residual is filled out and the type of chlorine is marked. The sample results will be reported to Crystal Clear and her contact information is listed. Bobby could also put his phone number in the other contact field in case Crystal is not available. Repeat samples. When do they have to be collected? Repeat samples must be collected after a positive sample result is detected. Repeats must be collected within 24 hours after being notified of the positive sample result. Where are they collected? 3 repeat samples must be collected. one at the original positive location, one upstream within 5 service connections, and one downstream within 5 service connections. How are they marked on the MRF? The 3 repeat samples must be marked as repeat under the sample type field on the microbial reporting form. The sample ID and date of originating sample field must be filled out. If you don't have this information, your lab can help you fill out this field. You can always refer to the RTCR repeat requirements flowchart that's shown on the right, and it shows where and when to collect repeats and how to mark them on the MRF. In this example, the PWS had a positive routine sample on May 8th. The PWS uses groundwater, and in addition to meeting the RTCR repeat requirements, they must also meet the groundwater rule triggered source monitoring requirements following a positive routine sample. In this example, the system has 2 active wells. As you can see, the PWS had to collect a total of 5 samples, 3 repeat samples and 2 triggered source monitoring samples or TSM samples. The repeat samples were collected as described in the previous slide. The operator listed the location address as well as the repeat location in parentheses for each repeat sample. All 3 repeat samples were marked as repeat only, including the repeat sample collected at the original sample site. The TSM samples were marked as raw well only, not repeat and raw well. The chlorine residuals for the TSM samples were documented even though they were 0. You must still write 0 and select the chlorine type for TSM samples. The originating sample ID was filled out for each sample. As you can see, these samples were collected within 24 hours after being notified of the sample results. Filling out this field for raw wells will indicate that this raw well sample is a TSM sample, and that is why the sample is only marked as raw well. Replacement samples. What are they? Replacement samples are collected following a rejected sample. They are collected from the original rejected sample site. Replacement samples can be routine, repeat, or raw well sample types. The sample type will always be the same as the original sample that was rejected. When are they collected? They must be collected within 24 hours after being notified of the sample rejection. How are they marked on the MRF? Replacements must have the replacement box checked off. Include the originating sample ID and collection date, and the sample type will be the same as the original rejected sample type. After collecting your samples and filling out the MRF, it's time to relinquish the samples to the lab. I've broken down what needs to be done by the PWS and lab before, during, and after sample relinquishment. Before relinquishing your samples, the PWS must review the MRF for accuracy and completeness. Ensure samples will be submitted within the 30-hour holding time, and that you have allowed a few hours for the lab to begin the sample incubation. During relinquishment, both the lab and PWS must ensure that the lab's sample acceptance policy is met. Review the MRF for accuracy and completeness. Complete the chain of custody signatures. The PWS will sign the relinquished by field with date and time, and the lab will sign the received by field with date and time. After relinquishment, the PWS must check your sample results. Complete any follow-up testing if required, and follow through with your data. No results doesn't mean negative results. The responsibility of reporting samples to the TCEQ apply to both the laboratory and the PWS. Laboratories report the data on behalf of the PWS. Negative sample data must be reported by the 10th day following the monitoring period. The best practice is to report weekly to avoid data issues when reporting large submission files. Smaller submission files will help identify issues easier and earlier, before the due date rather than after the due date. After submitting data, ensure the samples were migrated by checking that they were posted to Drinking Water Watch. If sample data did not post, you will receive an email with file rejections. Make sure to review these to fix any submission errors before resubmitting again. The RTCR program will perform a data QC to find any missing data and ensure it is caught before violations are sent out. We will send an email to any labs that were missing data during our lab outreach process. Please make sure to follow the instructions in the email and to reply to us as soon as possible.
Jackie, it looks like your screen might have gone to sleep. If you can wake it back up, please.
To avoid any violations issued in mistake. Once you find the missing data and submission files are corrected, please resubmit the data as soon as possible. Again, ensure your resubmissions were migrated by reviewing the samples on Drinking Water Watch. Ultimately, it is the public water system's responsibility to ensure their sample data has been reported to the TCEQ. To ensure this requirement is met, the PWS should check for their samples on Drinking Water Watch by the 11th day following the monitoring period. Follow through with your data. If you don't see it posted on Drinking Water Watch, call your lab to find out what happened. Ask your lab to resubmit data or to submit data. Again, review your samples on Drinking Water Watch to ensure they are posted. I have included the Drinking Water Watch website on the bottom right corner of this slide. Now that I've gone over all the steps required for routine monitoring and sample reporting, I'd like to discuss mistakes to avoid. These are mistakes that we have seen public water systems make, and they can be avoided. While collecting your samples, don't forget to follow your sampling SOP. Don't wait until the last minute to collect your samples, as this is when issues are likely to happen. Don't forget to disinfect the sampling tap. Don't forget to flush the tap. Don't mishandle collection bottles, as this can lead to contamination. Don't transport the bottles incorrectly. Try to transport in a clean cooler with clean ice packs and have the samples in a Ziploc bag to avoid potential contamination. Don't keep the samples for longer than the 30-hour holding time. These samples will be rejected even if they are 1 minute over the 30 hours. Finally, don't forget to fill out the MRF completely and accurately. Here are some mistakes to avoid when filling out the MRF. Again, these are mistakes we have seen public water systems make. The first mistake seen on here is that the dates for the first 2 samples are different from the last 3 samples. This could be a typo and the samples could have been collected on the same day. However, because the dates are different, some of these samples would be past the 30-hour holding time and would have to be rejected. This is a good example to always double check your dates, especially the year, during the first few months of the new year. Now, for the first sample collected at 1002 Main Street, they checked the replacement box but didn't include the originating sample ID and date. This missing information can cause problems when reporting data, since we don't know what rejected sample was being replaced. If you don't know this information, you can ask the lab for help. This is the only field the lab can modify on behalf of the PWS. Another possible mistake with the first sample is that it was meant to be a repeat sample from the original location, but was incorrectly marked as routine and replacement instead of repeat. If this sample was meant to be a repeat sample, it would not count as repeat, as it is marked right now, and this would lead to a possible assessment trigger. The second and fourth samples have multiple sample types checked off. The second sample should have been marked as raw well only, even though it was collected with the repeat samples as a TSM sample. Adding the originating sample ID will help identify the sample as a TSM sample. The fourth sample was marked as both repeat and special. This is something to be extra careful with because special samples are considered non-compliant samples under the RTCR. Under the Quality Assurance Project Plan, we cannot allow changes from non-compliant samples to compliant sample types, and vice versa for the RTCR. Non-compliant samples under the RTCR are special and construction sample types. Again, we cannot allow these changes to be made from non-compliance to compliance sample types. The second and third samples did have the originating sample ID, but not the date. The date is needed so the samples can be associated to the originating samples correctly. Make sure that this is filled out correctly as the laboratory uses this information when reporting samples electronically. The fourth sample doesn't have the originating sample information, so again, this would be a mistake. Remember, you can ask the lab for this information. This sample also doesn't have the free or total designation marked for the chlorine residual. Therefore, this would lead to a rejected sample. Finally, the last sample's location is listed as raw well. Sample locations need to be specific addresses that match the SSP, and for raw well samples, the location needs to be the well source ID. Not identifying what well the sample was collected from could lead to compliance issues as we wouldn't know if the requirements for that well were met. Another mistake with this sample is that there isn't a chlorine residual. Even though raw well samples are collected before treatment and will most likely have a 0 chlorine residual measurement, you must still enter the 0 value and choose free or total. Missing the chlorine residual will lead to a rejected sample. Finally, remember to double check the MRF for completeness and accuracy, as the laboratory will use this information to report the sample data to TCEQ. Here are some common errors we see on MRFs for all sample types. Writing the wrong PWS ID or leaving the PWS ID field blank. Missing the chlorine residual or missing the free or total chlorine designation. Missing the collection date, time, or AM or PM designation. Marking the wrong sample type or marking multiple sample types. Writing the wrong PWS name. Remember, it needs to match what is listed on Drinking Water Watch. Finally, missing the sample collector's signature. This will lead to rejected samples. Here are common errors we see on MRFs for repeat, raw well, and replacement sample types. Missing well source IDs for raw well samples. Marking replacement samples as repeat instead of checking the replacement box and marking the sample type as the original rejected sample. Marking TSM raw well samples as repeat instead of just raw well. Marking the repeat sample collected from the original positive site as a routine sample type. Missing chlorine residual for raw well samples or missing the total or free designation. Missing replacement box checks from the sample when it is a replacement sample for a rejected sample. Missing the originating sample information, which all of these sample types require. Remember, you can always ask the lab to help you with this field. Now that we've discussed the mistakes that could happen on the MRF, let's talk about why accuracy on the MRF matters. The MRF maintains data integrity from collection time through reporting. The MRF is the chain of custody, and it shows who has handled the samples. It is a permanent legal state record. Good record keeping reflects your system's management practices. The MRF is used by the labs to report your sample data to the TCEQ. Having good legible records means less headaches for all, which helps to report data easily. Remember, mistakes and errors may result in noncompliance with TCEQ. Finally, let's review how to successfully remain in compliance with the RTCR requirements. Remember to have an updated RTCR sample siting plan and to use your sampling SOP as a resource. Complete sample collection in a timely fashion and always complete the MRF legibly and accurately. Remember to relinquish samples to the lab in a timely fashion and not go over the 30-hour holding time. Ensure your sample results are reported to the TCEQ. It's important to remember to follow through with your data. Try to avoid common mistakes by always double-checking your information. And finally, remember why accuracy matters and make it a habit to always maintain data integrity. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call us. My direct contact information is listed here. The RTCR program general inbox email is another great way to contact anyone in the RTCR. If needed, you can also call our Water Supply Division main line and leave a voicemail for RTCR. Just make sure to mention that you want to speak to someone in the RTCR program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. We really appreciate that. I think that a lot of the samples were already answered here on the side, but let me go ahead and check for a few that were not. When collecting the percent of total coliform positive, do the repeats count or just the routines?
Should I answer that question?
Oh, yes. Sorry, please do.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. When calculating the total number of positive samples, the routine samples do count. That is for assessment triggers only, not for your sample schedule monitoring requirements.
You meant repeats count towards the positives, right?
Right. The repeat samples will count towards the positive.
Okay. Just making sure. All right. And then June also wrote, can you address filling the bottles correctly? They should have about, okay. Yeah, let me go ahead and turn my camera on and I have a bottle to poke at. It's in the video that we linked that you can go ahead to the PowerPoints that are on the DWAWG. Those have a discussion in the video on how to fill the bottle properly, but hopefully you can see this pretty well. If you're a water system, you want to make sure that you fill beyond this 100 milliliter line because that's the minimum for actual running of the test. They, as in the lab, needs an additional amount, generally up to the shoulder area, in order for them to perform a test that confirms that there is no chlorine residual. And then you cannot fill it all the way up because there needs to be enough headspace to sufficiently shake the container and get a representative sample, A, for the actual test itself, and B, for the chlorine neutralization test. Hopefully that's what they were looking for. Okay. And then what is the reason to record a 0 chlorine residual and type of chlorine for a well where no... So the answer is, Melissa, there should be a test performed. You should check to make sure that you do not have chlorine on a raw water sample. You're checking to make sure you don't have an unintended backflow from your chlorinator. You want to make sure you're getting a real raw sample. And sometimes these raw samples are taken after a well has been disinfected. You also want to make sure that the chlorine from the well shocking or disinfection has been run through the system and you're getting an actual raw sample. So they actually should be measuring it and they'll need to record it as a 0 to ensure that it is a raw representative sample. Jackie, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
And just as an FYI, the rule indicates that anytime you take a bacteriological sample, you must also take a chlorine residual with it. So that also just falls within the requirements of the rule. Okay, well, if there aren't any more questions now, we can revisit this later. But for now, I'd like to go ahead and pitch to our next presenter, Lee Apostolo, who'll be discussing the data aspects.
Lee, you're muted, just so you know.
Okay. I had checked in with Lee via text and appeared like she was ready to go, but we might be having some technical difficulties. So, oh, are you there, Lee? Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry, I just wasn't patient enough. It's pretty much my MO. Here we go.
Okay. Okay. Hi, guys. I'm Lee Apostolo, and I basically monitor the data that comes through the E2 reporting system for labs. And so the presentation is basically just an overcap of what Jackie just reviewed. Can everyone see that okay?
I'm seeing it fine. Thank you, Lee.
Okay. So basically E2, you know, this is a presentation on common sample data errors that we see coming through the sample data that's submitted by the labs through E2. E2 is a web-based application that allows accredited labs to submit their total coliform and their groundwater rule sample data. Either the laboratory or a public water system will be submitting the sample data through E2. Common lab errors that we see usually are data field entries, like when the lab is creating the CSV file for the upload to E2. A lot of times we'll see data entry errors in the CSV file, or when the lab is using the E2 online entry form, for manual entry, there'll be errors usually. And some of those errors that we normally see are examples such as the public water system number is incorrectly entered, an incorrect facility ID number, the date format, and a lot of times people or labs transpose or incorrectly enter receipt dates or collection dates for the samples. Labs can minimize errors, first of all, by making sure all the MRF data that's reported by the water system is entered correctly into the CSV file. Take necessary steps to prevent bad data from entering your LIMS system. Following in-house procedures, you know, that each lab may have in place for your specific lab. Make sure when you're using the online entry form in E2, just pay attention to your entries for each field as you're entering the data from the MRF. Making sure that your uploaded file to E2 is a CSV file if you're using that format. And make sure to review, it really helps to use the 9.1 Appendix A table structure that's defined in the lab guide. That structure should be followed like to the T. It really makes a difference between a successful submission of data, electronic data, to TCEQ. And then again, here is the link for that, for the user guide. And then common errors that we see by a water system is usually, I convey this from what I hear either from a lab or from the RTCR or groundwater compliance team. The microbial reporting form, the facility ID number does not match what is defined in the Texas Drinking Water Watch site. Collector name is not included on the MRF, and then collection date errors are the most common. A public water system can minimize errors by making sure you record your data accurately on the MRF that's reported to TCEQ. Review your submitted sample documentation required by TCEQ, and then really just reviewing your QAP, your quality assurance project plan that's detailed. And I've included the link to that here. A good resource for labs and for the water system is, as Jackie mentioned before, is the Texas Drinking Water Watch site. And this site contains all the information that we have on sample data for a public water system, or information that we've received from a lab for a PWS. It specifies water system numbers, sample results, facility ID numbers, and a whole other spectrum of information. I can't reiterate enough how important it is to become familiar with the Texas Drinking Water Watch site. It's very helpful. I mean, it has all of the information that TCEQ receives for sample data that's been reported to us. So, if there's any questions, and that's really it. It was basically just a recap of what Jackie covered in the previous presentation.
Thank you, Lee. I definitely want to let people know that I cannot preach the importance of the E2 user guide enough. Prior to my embodiment at the TCEQ, I worked in a laboratory, and that guide has an amazing amount of information in it. It really can walk you baby step through how to create those files successfully. And water system, if you're curious as to how technical your lab is doing on your behalf, it's a great opportunity to see what they're asked to do and how much they're asked to go through to get that piece of paper you turn into them to us in a data format that uploads easily and allows for compliance to be run. Just to let you know, we as the TCEQ are looking at about 7,000 systems per month, and about 28,000 results for bacteriological or microbial compliance come through. And that's a lot for us to look at. So when the data comes through in an electronic format and we can use data tools to review it, it speeds up our responses to you, triggering of assessments and all of those follow-up activities, and also increases our accuracy. So it's vitally important, and what the laboratories do to make that data come in is well documented, but also a heavy lift. So once again, choose a lab who is a partner in your success. And laboratories, thank you for the efforts you go through to make that happen. It really is able to make our program run a lot smoother. Are there any other questions related to microbial compliance this morning before we move on to the chlorine portion of our presentation? All right, I'm not seeing anything at this point in time, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing that presentation. There was some concern about presentations not being viewable to everyone, depending on whether they're using the desktop app, the phone app, or the web browser link. So please, if you are unable to see the PowerPoints, they are all posted on the DWAWG website. Sean Abels has provided those links in the chat function. So please feel free to reach out and grab those. They're also there for posterity. So if you are needing to refer back to them, or if you need any of the links or the forms that we share, you should be able to access them in that way. So kind of like this morning when we talked about micro, we're going to go ahead and move forward with chlorine monitoring and the foundations for success. My main goal is to not only discuss roles and responsibilities, but hopefully to discuss it in a format that is easy to follow. And as always, our goal is to increase awareness and compliance for successful chlorine monitoring reporting. Sorry, Lee, I think you're sharing your screen right now. If you could go ahead and close that off. Thank you. Sorry, folks. Let me go ahead and reshare.
I'm sorry. Did I stop it?
Yeah, it's okay. I'll reshare. Sorry, it'll just be a momentary delay, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Sorry for the delay. So I'm going to start with why, because why is the most important. Chlorine is basically the most important thing we can do to decrease the likelihood of pathogenic bacteria. The CDC's top 10 public health achievements of the 1900s includes the reduction of infectious disease through clean water and sanitation. Chlorine is known to reliably inactivate bacteria and viruses. So by having a chlorine residual that you can reliably measure in your system, you're proving that you have a barrier to entry for viruses and bacteria. By controlling those, we're preventing infectious disease. You're not hearing about people passing away from gastrointestinal distress, typhoid, those types of things anymore, most of the time in the United States of America. We're also protecting our distribution system against contamination. By having that residual there, if you have a small undetected leak or some amount of infiltration or backflow, that chlorine can protect your system from bacteriological contamination. So this is vitally important to us. We also know that proper management of disinfectant residual has proven effective in preventing proliferation of Naegleria fowleri and other opportunistic pathogens. So as consequences of our world increase the prevalence of some of those bacteria and some of those pathogens, protecting ourselves with that chlorine residual is particularly important. And then, of course, why is also it's a Texas regulatory requirement. So we need you to do it. It is a rule. And behind that is the need to communicate to your public, letting them know if you're having issues with your chlorine residual, providing the public notifications related to that, and then also obviously issuing violations if you are failing to comply with the minimums. So who? This is mostly falling on TCEQ and the public water system. So we're obviously doing the compliance, and the public water systems themselves are doing the monitoring. In very rare instances, labs are performing chlorine analysis or operational duties, but in those cases, they're acting as an operations company, not necessarily as a laboratory. And who is all water systems? So we've included the citation there. That is every single water system, whether you're a small transient transient non-community restaurant or gas station, all the way up to multi-million person community systems. Every single water system needs to monitor their chlorine residual. Who should be doing it is, for the most part, they should be licensed operators. From time to time, as I mentioned, related to the microbial analysis, TNCs can be exempt from licensing. Just as a reminder, anyone who performs these duties should be licensed unless they're exempt. And those process control duties specifically indicate determining the adequacy of disinfection and disinfectant procedures and taking microsamples, which, as I mentioned during the micro, every time a microsample is taken, a chlorine residual must be taken as well. And who, again, is the approved labs? And when I say labs here, an approved lab is going to be your water system in the field going through us to get a lab approval. So because chlorine has such a short holding time, 15 minutes or less, you can't practically collect that, take it to a laboratory and have it analyzed. It would exceed its holding time in the process of transport. So for the vast majority of water systems, they're going to need to be their own approved laboratory in order to properly run and report these chlorine residuals. For us, that means that you're going to need to look at 290, 119, which you'll see the citation here. And samples collected to determine compliance shall be analyzed at accredited or approved labs. Specifically, chlorine and chloramine requires approved labs with a method in 40 CFR 141, 131C. And these should also be something that you resubmit to us and re-up every 3 years. So take an opportunity to think to yourself, when's the last time I did my lab approval with TCEQ? Now might be a good time. So what are you doing? You're actually performing chlorine residual analysis. In the state of Texas, although we may allow you to use some alternative disinfectant in your treatment process, we need a chlorine residual that can be measured in the distribution system. So for the most people, this is going to be free and total or chloramines. But not only are you analyzing, you're also reporting that to us. So from a reporting perspective, if you are a groundwater system, you're going to be doing this, or a purchased water system, you'll be doing this through the DLQOR. We'll have more information on how to do that properly in the following presentation. If by any chance you are a surface water or GUI system, you'll be doing this through your SWMOR. And then if you are someone who's performing the DLQOR and you need to submit it, we highly recommend you do that through the E2 application, allowing for electronic reporting. It keeps a history for you. It does calculations for you. It really is something that can benefit you as a system to use that application. What is also the record keeping involved? So you may submit a DLQOR and SWMOR, and those are summary. They tell us you took this many samples, you had an average value of this, you met our requirement of the average. But each unique location, every single sample you take in the distribution system should meet our minimums based on rule. So, you know, our minimum requirement for a free residual is going to be a 0.2 milligrams per liter. And if you're using a combined residual, it's going to be 0.5 milligrams per liter. So you want to hold on to that raw disinfectant residual data so that you can indicate those minimums are being met throughout the system. It also indicates if you're having an issue, if you're struggling somewhere, where you need to concentrate your actions to improve residual. So those should be recorded. Either if you're a large system, you might have continuous monitoring. If you're a smaller system, you may be able to go down to weekly or daily logs. Emily will kind of discuss this in her presentation later, but we do, as TCEQ, try to facilitate this and give you some just, you know, templates you could use to help record that raw data. And then, of course, you'd need to hold on to your DLQOR or your SWMOR summary data that you submit to us. This is a reminder to anyone that if you are actually doing those raw records as well as the equipment records, so if you analyze for chlorine, you want to do it on a properly prepared residual analyzer, which we'll discuss later, all of the records related to that have to be retained for a 3-year minimum. Bear in mind that you can do this electronically. You just need to make sure that we can continue to access those records. And then, of course, the microbial results that are attached to the MRFs that you submit with a chlorine residual on them need to be held onto for a 5-year minimum. So when do you need to do chlorine monitoring? The frequency is going to depend on your population and your source. These are all written out in the rule, so I won't belabor you with those. But the general wins are going to be entry points. So if you are doing an entry point sampling, this is going to be mostly related to people who are providing surface water or GUI water. One thing I really want to discuss about frequency is what daily, weekly, and monthly mean. So if our rules state 7 days for weekly, that means 7 days or less. If you do 8 days, even though it's in the next calendar week, that doesn't meet our rule requirement. And daily means every day, not every business day. It means every single day. So if it's a holiday or a weekend, you should still be taking a residual in order to comply with daily. Everyone has to move on to this next category of in distribution. Like I said, that may be, depending on your population, your source, that may be continuously every single day. That may be once a week. So you need to look at the rule requirement for your system based on the population and the source type. The microbial samples, as I indicated, whether you're taking 1 a month or whether you're taking 400 a month, every time you take a microbial sample, you should be doing chlorine monitoring as well. Then finally, for those people who are chloraminating or have enough naturally occurring ammonia that they end up with a total chloramine residual, they should be also analyzing and monitoring for chlorine every time they do their chloramine effectiveness sampling and when they do dose changes. Where should people be sampling? Well, as I indicated, the entry point. Entry point is where the water is actually entering your system. So this applies to everyone, but surface water and GUIs must do it all the time. And for groundwater systems, it would be if we asked you to at the request of the ED. In distribution system, this should be on your monitoring plan. This is why having an up-to-date monitoring plan is so important. Make sure that you know where you're taking them. You should also be taking them every time you take a microbial site. So if you have, your system has to take 30 chlorine residuals per month because you are on the daily, or you have to take 30 to 31 depending on the length of the month, 20 to 29 in February depending on the year. Every single day you need to have at least that number of sites available. So you need to know what those are and have them written down. If you only have to take 1 or 2 BACTs a month, then you can have specific microbial sites, and you also need to take the chlorine residual while you're at those microbial sites. If you take 400 BACTs a month, you still need to take 1 chlorine residual at every single one of those BACT sites as well. Finally, our rule very specifically indicates that these should be representative locations. Unfortunately, we do not define representative locations, so we go with the common definition. So to give you an idea, the Merriam-Webster definition is serving as a typical or characteristic example. So in other words, whenever we are looking to see whether your sample sites are representative, we look, okay, is that what is typical for your system? Are you being representative and characteristic of everything out there in your system? Then the how. How are you actually going to do this analysis? Well, as I indicated earlier, you have to do it based on an approved method. It said CFR 141.131C. We're not going to make you go look in the CFR. We've tried to take all the guesswork out of it, and we have gathered those together in our lab approval form. So what you'll see here is a snippet from our lab approval form. That form is TCEQ 10450, and it indicates all the approved lab and methods. So give you an idea, you can choose from anything in those 4 right-hand columns. EPA method 334, ASTM methods, the standard methods, and then of course some of them are proprietary methods which are also EPA approved. So you can choose any of those. For us, you'd also need to, I would like to call out to you that we have told you what your minimum quality control requirements are. So this form also tells you that the minimum calibration frequency has to happen every 90 days. If you're doing it manually, and if you have a continuous online analyzer, you should be checking every 7 days. So make sure that you are following those minimum requirements. When we say that you're needing to do this calibration, the next column over tells you how that calibration can happen. So it says check with a chlorine solution of known concentration, which is called a primary standard, or by comparison for the online analyzers and the result of the approved benchtop method. So although they are not directly a chlorine solution, you may have a gel standard of some sort like this that could be used for your calibrations to ensure that the system, that the analysis equipment is reading the proper amount of chlorine for the amount that the instrument is accurate to what's actually in your sample. Finally, your analysis needs to be minimum to a 0.1 milligram per liter accuracy. So if you've chosen any method that you cannot get to 0.1, then you cannot be using it for compliance samples. So just some notes related to the how. Most people who are going to be doing chlorine residual are going to choose something that can be done in the field. Because you're going to need to be taking them at your bacteriological sites. You're going to need to be taking them at potentially the entry point, but also within your distribution system. As I said, with the holding time, most of the time you're going to need to do it out in the field. So a lot of them are going to be DPD colorimetric procedures. The main standard method for DPD colorimetric is 4500 CL, which stands for chlorine, and then G, which is colorimetric. So something to look at. This is just taken from one manual. Whichever instrument you choose, you may have a different manual. You want to confirm with your documentation that it meets these minimums. So as you can see here, it very clearly, I've highlighted it for you, meets the US EPA DPD method requirement. And if you follow the footnote, it says it's acceptable for reporting for water and drinking water analyses, wastewater and drinking water analyses. And that also tells you that it's based on an approved method for drinking water. So please make sure before you purchase a new piece of equipment or before you are continuing to use your existing piece of equipment that it meets minimum requirements to be approved and meet our accuracy. And then, of course, make sure that you can demonstrate that you can do it correctly. I know that we're kind of running on time here. So there are several videos out there from the rural water associations in multiple states on how to use your instrument correctly. A lot of people, that would be the best way to go because it's very specific to your instrument. Some items that I would like to make sure people understand is that some common problems that we see are going to be choosing a site that's not representative. So make sure you consult your monitoring plan. Make sure that you open the tap and let it run so that it stabilizes temperature, so that you're showing that you're getting water that is representative of the main. Make sure that you set up your instrument correctly. Choose the appropriate range. They are being kind of moved away from at this point because there's newer technology available. But as you can see, this instrument here is able to read up to 4 milligrams per liter chlorine. If by any chance it's flashing a 4.0 or 4.4 on the screen to you, flashing indicates that you've exceeded the capabilities of the instrument. Some might read to 2 and they'll be flashing a 2.2 at you. Some of them may read to 8 and they'll be flashing an 8.8 at you. If you're consistently writing down a 2.2 every single time, chances are you're outside of the range of your instrument. Please check that. And when you collect your sample, make sure that you're collecting the appropriate volume for the method you're using. So you can see that even though this is based on standard method 4500G, it has a very particular method on how to run it. So make sure that you're following the method for your instrument. They do differ. Some require different amounts of water to be collected. Make sure that whenever you're actually doing your collection in the sample cell is in good condition. A lot of the time I will see that people have a very a buildup within their sample cells that gives it a brownish yellow gray color, sometimes a purple color. That is not accurate, is not going to be able to give you an accurate reading because it's blocking light. That's what colorimetric means. It's going to read the amount of light that comes through to the sensor. So just like a tint on the sample container could do it, other things like lint, thumbprints, and also condensation are big problems. So make sure that you carry a lint-free cloth with you or potentially a chem wipe, a disposable lint-free cloth, and that you measure those, wipe it very closely right before you measure it. It can also be affected by air bubbles, especially when it's cold like this. You might have so much dissolved oxygen that you're going to get air bubbles in your sample. Make sure to gently agitate the vial to get rid of those bubbles before you go to measure. Make sure that you zero your instrument correctly. Make sure that you add your reagent and that the reagent is unexpired, the right size for your method, and that it is swirled, not vigorously shaken because then you'll get air bubbles, but swirled to, sorry, I lost the presentation again, but make sure that you're not over shaking because then you'll introduce entrapped air. And then also make sure that you're waiting the appropriate time. If you are a free system, you'll want to make sure that you measure using a free reagent. If you are a total system, make sure that you're using a total reagent and waiting the appropriate time. Free, because it is not waiting for a larger compound to react, is going to react quickly, and you should read it usually between 30 seconds and 1 minute in. And then for total residual, once again, depends on the method, but for the most part, you're going to be waiting for between 3 and 6 minutes. Okay, finally, when you're done, make sure that you treat those vials right so that they're good from now on. So thoroughly rinse them and allow them to air dry. All right, so I've lost the presentation, but that is the end of where we were at. I'd like to, at this point in time, hand it off to Emily so that she can discuss with you all data reporting through E2 for DLQOR. So you've gotten all this chlorine residual information. Make sure you get credit for it by submitting it to us properly. So Emily, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am, Michelle.
Excellent. I'll spotlight you. Thank you.
Can you see the presentation, or is it in like notes view?
Nope, I'm good to go. Hopefully everyone else can see it as well.
Okay. So my name is Emily Smith, and I will be speaking about what to do now that you've gotten your raw residual data and how to successfully report that to the TCEQ using the DLQOR both in the paper format and through the E2 site. So like Michelle said before, who is required to complete the DLQR is all groundwater and purchased water systems. That includes everybody, including the transient systems. For the transient systems, you just have to keep that form at the system. You don't need to submit that to TCEQ. On a quarterly basis, you do need to hang on to that, though, in case it's requested. The community and non-transient, non-community systems must submit that quarterly to TCEQ. There are two reporting options. You can either mail in a paper form or you can submit that online using the E2 steers format. So how often are you required to collect your residual? Michelle mentioned this also, so it's kind of a recap, but weekly, once every 7 days, if the population is less than 750 people and your connection count is less than 250. Otherwise, it would be a minimum of daily samples if your population is greater than 750 or your connection count is greater than 250. So if either one of those numbers is exceeded, that would bump you up to daily monitoring. And like Michelle said, always when a coliform sample is collected, you need to take that residual. So going through this presentation, I kind of put together this example system because sometimes it's nice to see how it works start to finish using an example. This is an example, and I've used a worksheet that we provide online for help with organizing your data. You don't have to use this worksheet. It's just provided out there to help sometimes smaller systems, but however you choose to monitor or maintain your monthly logs is acceptable. This is just something out there.
Emily, this is Jessica. It looks like something happened to your PowerPoint and it stopped sharing.
Okay.
It looks like that might be intermittent because I'm still seeing it, but Emily, if you could close it out and try resharing it, maybe we'll have more success.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, Emily.
No, you're good. Did that bring it back?
Yeah, I see it now. It was weird. It was there and then just disappeared. So there just must be something going on with Teams.
Okay. So back to this example system. This site, the system is small. It's less than 750 customers, so they're just required to do that once every 7 days sample. They collected their one coliform sample for the month as seen in the top box. They recorded their residual as a 5.0. And then they checked that that wasn't below the minimum and that there was no residual, or that there wasn't no residual. And then at the bottom, you see their other three residual sites collected for that month. At the bottom in the monthly summary, this is the data that you will use to fill out your DLQR. So it's kind of handy to calculate it beforehand, that way you're not trying to crunch a bunch of numbers once a quarter. But this one's pretty straightforward because it's a smaller system. You've got the highest reading of 5, you've got the lowest reading of 0.1, which is below the minimum. So they marked it that there was one sample below that minimum value of 0.2. So you've collected your residuals. Now what do you do with it? First, we'll talk about how to fill out the paper DLQR. In terms of layout of the forms, the paper is very similar to the E2 layout, and so like where the boxes are, they match up pretty well. So this is just a blank DLQR. We'll go into the specific information here. At the top, you'll put the year and the quarter, the name of the system, the ID number of the system, and what type of disinfectant you used. For the monthly summary, each month it'll be the same kind of information. So we'll just go through each box. The average, you'll add up all your system samples that you took during that month at those approved sample sites in your monitoring plan. Then you'll divide it by the number of residuals that you collected, and you'll get that average for the month. The next box is the number of residuals. Again, you'll include the count of all the residuals collected, including those collected with the coliform samples. That's included as part of this count. For the number below minimum box, that's where you'll put the number of readings that you collected during the month that were below the minimum value. So either 0.2 if you're using free chlorine, or 0.5 if you're using total. On the form is really nice. You'll type in the number of readings and it will auto-calculate that percentage for you. So that saves you a little bit of math. As long as we've got a number of readings on our side, it also auto-calculates when we enter that. And so just make sure that number of readings is either 0 if there were no samples below the minimum, or however many you collected below the minimum. Similar with the number with no residual, that's if you take a sample and it has 0.00 residual. That's where you would record that sample, but you would also put that in the number below minimum because 0.00 does fall below whatever your minimum value is. So if you have a sample that has 0.00 residual, there should be a 1 in the number below minimum box as well as the number with no residual box. For the quarterly summary down at the bottom, so you'll put your 3 months, all the same data. At the bottom is the quarterly summary. You'll take the average of all the disinfectant residuals for the quarter. So you add your monthly averages up, divide it by 3. For the lowest residual for the quarter, that's where you'll go back and you'll look at all your raw data for the quarter and you'll pick out the residual that had the lowest value. So you'll look at all your samples and pick the lowest one. It's not which month average is the lowest, it's which individual sample is the lowest value. And then same for the highest residual, you'll go back, look at all your data, and pick out the value that had the highest residual count. So common errors that we see with this paper format is missing signature at the bottom. You'll fill out your contact information. You need to sign it. We will not accept it without a signature. You will have to mail in another one because we do need that original signature to accept it. It does need to be signed by a licensed water operator, so it can't be signed on behalf of somebody else. It does need to be signed by that licensed water operator. Some other common errors is the ID number is missing, or the name is missing, or they don't match. Sometimes I know some operators submit a bunch of these for different systems. Sometimes they'll put the wrong number and a wrong name. It's just important that they match. We do check those things. The lowest and highest residual are incorrect. So if you put a lowest residual of 1.0 and then one of the monthly averages is a 0.5, there's some issue there with the math because all the monthly averages should fall between that lowest residual and highest residual value. It's important to note that if you do report a residual that's below the minimum, we do need one of the number below minimum boxes filled in, indicating which month and how many samples that would correlate with. And then we do need, if you don't have some of the data, like if you change your operator midway through the quarter and the old operator didn't leave the data behind for you, fill out what you have and then send us a cover letter explaining why there's missing data. We will reach out to you anyways if there is no cover letter with an explanation. So it kind of just saves us a step if you send us that cover letter with the explanation along with that report. Okay. So going back to that example system, I used that for the log sheet to fill out the January row at the top, and then I put in some other numbers just to fill out a completed report. So you kind of get an idea of what a acceptable report looks like. The lowest residual for the quarter is listed as 0.1, so you can see in January there's a 1 in the number below minimum box to represent that sample. It's signed, it's all filled in correctly. So this would be an acceptable submission for this water system. All right, so what if you want to submit it using the E2 online portal? This picture's a little fuzzy on my screen, but the layout's very similar to the paper layout as far as the quarter year at the top. The system name is already filled in. You'll pick your type of disinfectant, and then it's got your monthly summaries followed by that quarterly summary row. So now we're just kind of going to walk you through how to create an account on Steers and use it for that. You may already have an account, and so this wouldn't apply to you, but just kind of to recap how to get to this point. This is the Steers homepage. If you want to create an account, you'll click in that red box where it says, I need to create a new account. If you've forgotten your password, you'll click in that red box, I need my password. Otherwise, you would enter your account number and your password up above it at the top and log in that way. The first page you're going to get to when you click I need to create a new account is this account creation page. You'll fill in all the required information, which is marked by the red asterisk. It's important to watch the time. Each page only gives you 15 minutes before it automatically kicks you out. So make sure you have like all your information, like your mailing address, the phone number, that kind of stuff. Make sure you have it all handy so that way you don't get kicked out while you're trying to fill in this page. You'll click the next button at the bottom. It will ask you to confirm everything, and you'll click OK, which will bring you to this security question page. You'll pick 5 questions. You'll write down your answers. Make sure you remember what answers you put for your questions, because it will ask you one of these questions every time you log in to your account. So if you don't remember, it'll give you 3 tries to get it right before it doesn't let you log in. So just make sure what questions you pick and what answers you put. You'll click that Save button. It'll bring you to this page. You're going to pick your program area. So you'll select this program, Public Drinking Water Systems, PDWSYS. You'll click Go. And it'll bring you to this access type page and authorization. There are 3 access types. There's the system read, system edit, and system sign and submit. The read access type will let you view only, so you can't create a report, you can't edit a report, it will just let you view one. The edit type will let you view, create, delete, and modify a report. And then that sign and submit one is probably what most people are going to want, because that will let them actually submit the report for the system. So you'll pick your access type. Under authorization, you'll pick the best description of your relationship to the facility. Either you are the facility, company, other, however you feel is best described. Whoever is authorizing the access type. So that first button, it says I'm applying for a read, edit, or prepare a role. You'll only pick that one if you pick your access type as read or edit. If you do the sign and submit access type, you'll want to pick one of those bottom 2 options where either you have the authority or somebody else is giving you the authority. The bottom ones, if somebody else gives you the authority, you'd fill in their contact information as noted. This is where you would add the system IDs that you're trying to submit for. It's important to note that you do need to enter TX followed by that 7-digit PWS ID number. Otherwise, it'll get you an error. So it's TX followed by that 7-digit ID number. You can add multiple, as you can see here, by the number of boxes. You can also, if you're taking over for another operator and you know their account number, you can fill in that bottom red box where it says account number to easily copy all the system IDs that the old operator had on their account. It's important to note that on Steers, the account's linked to the operator, not to the system. So if you do get a new operator, your new operator would need to make a new account in using their information. So it's important to note after you set this up, your account is listed in probation status. In order to activate your account, you need to fill out the Steers participation agreement. There are 2 options for this. The The buttons are up in that red box. There's a paper SPA and an e-sign SPA. The paper SPA, you would print it out, fill it in, and mail it in. The quicker option is that e-sign. That would use information off your Texas driver's license to fill that account, and you'll get an email stating that the account's been created, and it will prompt you to set up your password at that point once they've received that SPA. Okay, so we've made our account. Now what do we do? This is how to submit the DLQR. So you'll log into the STEERS homepage, that top image. You'll click your program area, which is Public Drinking Water Systems. It will bring you to the E2 homepage, which is that bottom screen, which you will click Water System, which is circled in red, that tab up at the top. This will bring up this page. You will want to click Create New Reports to create a new DLQR. And then in the circled red area, you'll see Disinfectant Level Quarterly Operating Report as the form type. And in that third column under Online Entry Form, that is the button you will click to pull up the online entry form. This is the online entry form. It looks very similar to the paper form as far as the data that we're requesting. There's the monthly average, number of residuals, number below min, and it's all the same. It's filled in the same way as the paper one that I previously described. One nice thing, this online form will calculate your quarterly average for you. So don't panic if you fill it all in and it's blank. Once you hit submit, that average is calculated. It's important to remember to press submit. I know a lot of issues have come up where systems think they've submitted, but they actually only saved it. So it's important. I recommend clicking validate and save, because the validate will run a bunch of checks to make sure your data is sufficient and accurate, and it will pop up any warnings that might appear, which we'll go over in the next slide. So that will validate it and save it, but you need to push that submit button, which is outlined in red. That is how you successfully submit it and avoid any sort of monitoring reporting violations. These are just some example E2 warning messages that you might get. If it's a validation failed, it will not let you submit if one of those pops up until you fix it. If it's just a warning message, it is encouraged that you look over your data to make sure it's all good, but it will let you submit if it's just a warning that appears. These are just a couple of examples of things you might see. So some common errors with the E2 format of the DLQR. The lowest residual is incorrect. Kind of the same thing with the paper format. If your lowest residual is a 1.0, but one of the monthly averages is 0.5, there's some math error somewhere with the numbers. If your lowest residual is below the minimum, you do need to fill out that number below minimum box. Same with the paper. And then a lot of questions we get on how to, if they catch a mistake, how do they fix it? You can't go back and edit an old DLQR error. You have to submit a complete new one. So just email the DBP box with that old and new submission ID number, and we'll go in and remove that duplicate and get the right one processed into our database for you. Another common error that has recently been brought to my attention is it's encouraged to wait until you receive, so when you submit the DLQR, you get a confirmation email stating it was submitted. It's encouraged that you wait until you get that confirmation email before starting a new report. It's especially applicable to people that are submitting multiple reports for multiple systems. It's kind of causing an issue with the STEERS site. So it's encouraged you wait for that confirmation email, then you can start the next report that you're trying to submit. Going back to that example system, this is just what a E2 submission would look like for it. It's very similar to the paper in terms of the format and the data. This is just kind of what the end product looks like. So I'll briefly mention the violation types associated with the DLQR program. There's the maximum residual disinfectant level violation, or the MRDL. That occurs if the running annual average of all your monthly averages is exceeding the 4.0. It doesn't occur if a single sample exceeds the 4.0. It's based off that running annual average. A treatment technique violation would occur if more than 5% of your samples in 2 consecutive months fall below that minimum value. So it needs to be 2 consecutive months. It wouldn't occur if, say, January you met the 5% and then March you met the 5%, because they're not consecutive. That would not warrant a treatment technique violation. And then monitoring reporting, if it's for a non-submittal or if you submit a late report, that would incur a monitoring reporting violation. So just kind of to wrap it up, we're going back to the example system. This is the raw data again. They've got their 4 samples. They've got their monthly summary all filled out. They're going to use that monthly summary data to fill out the paper DLQR, which would look similar to this. And then going back to that E2 submission, it looks similar to this. These would be considered acceptable DLQR submissions. All the data's there. Everything's reported appropriately. So just some key takeaways. It's important to know how to take accurate residual readings and how to train new operators properly. That just makes sure everybody's on the same page using the SOPs. It's important to retain those monthly data logs with the raw data in case they're requested. It's also important to review your raw data to determine any potential deficiencies. If you get several samples that are below the minimum, take a look at it, figure out why it's not retaining the minimum residual and work to fix that. And then it's also important to understand how to correctly report the data to TCEQ. We review these reports as we get them, and we will be reaching out if there's data missing, if there's data filled in incorrectly. So we will reach out to you to get those updates, but make sure to look it over before you send it in. So overall, good residual levels equals a healthy public. These are just a couple helpful links. The first is for the electronic reporting website. If you've got any E2 questions, that's a good resource. And then the disinfectant residual reporting website has information on the DLQR and disinfection. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, there's my direct number and my personal email. If you have questions about your account information on Steers, like passwords, your account number, if you get locked out, the Steers helpline can help you, and there's their number and their email as well. That is it.
Thank you, Emily. Does anybody have questions on this? Any concerns they have that we could potentially address while we're together this morning? Okay. Actually, Emily, new question just came across. Is there any discussion on increasing the capacity for Steers since the program gets bogged down leading to the 10th? Emily, I guess I could probably address this for you. Just let you know that Steers is a TCEQ agency-wide application. It is not a water supply division application. The E2 application is ours. So the answer is no, not really, because they aren't actually experiencing an issue with slowdown so much as they have too many people using it incorrectly. So we're trying to educate. We're trying to make sure that people understand that they need to close out their sessions, that they need to actually close out their browser when they're done. If not, it looks like 100 people are trying to do something when only 2 or 3 are still in the system. So for now, really, there isn't a problem with Steers not being able to handle it. It's that it's not being used properly. We are working internally to try and educate people on that and also create some automated processes to improve that. Also, long and short of that is you have every moment from the beginning of the 1st all the way through to the close of the 10th. We'd highly recommend that your data is already there by the end of the previous month. So anyone who can get in on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc., can have a much better experience with both E2 and with Steers. If you are experiencing a significant problem, please let us know, because we hear this anecdotally, but we can't look into each case because we don't know about them. So if you give us your particular case, when you tried to sign on, what a screenshot of what error you got, maybe we can get to the bottom of a different issue that we have been unable to identify with our information technology group. And I would highly encourage you to send those to us. So like I said, we could take a look and see if there's a different issue that we're unaware of. Mr. Phelan has asked regarding signature, does it need to be signed by the chief operator or any licensed operator who can represent the organization?
Yeah, it just needs to be anybody with a water operator license D or greater, depending on your system type and population. But it doesn't need to be the chief operator, but they do need to have a license to sign off.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, those are all the comments we had for this morning related to the chlorine residual. Does anybody have any other questions or concerns about micro, about analysis, anything else we've covered this morning before we close off for this morning's session? Ms. Buru, the question is it mandatory to have the license on the MRF? So it is mandatory to have the signature. Let me double check. I think that we do.
Michelle, are you there? Just want to make sure that you didn't get dropped.
Oh, I don't know if she got dropped. I know she was trying to check the QAPP. I'll go ahead and respond to that question. So the labs, oh, are you back?
Yeah, but go ahead. You probably have it. I was just flipping through my book here to check and make sure I didn't say it wrong. So if you know, go ahead.
So the lab is not required to reject the sample if the operator license number is not included on the form, and that is specifically addressed in the QAPP Addenda 4 in the, let's see, it's on page 13 of 26, just for your information. So ideally, if you are there on site and the operator is the one who's bringing it in, if they could fill out all of the portions of the form, that's what we would like, but at this point, that isn't a required field.
Thank you for that, Jessica. Any other questions? All right. Well, I would very much like to say thank you guys for this morning. I hope we gave some really good information out, and I appreciate the comments and questions. They were really useful. As we mentioned before, these PowerPoints will be available on our DWAWG website. So if you need the links or you need to refer back, you should be able to do that. And of course, the recording of this will go on the TCAQ's YouTube channel. So you can, chime in and go, okay, well, I need to go to where they were at 11 o'clock and scroll through 2 hours, and there you go. So hopefully we've got that available for you guys to refer back to anytime you need to. I highly encourage folks, laboratories specifically, but also any water system that's interested in the nitty-gritty of what their lab does for them. Please, and actually what our program requires of the labs as well, that we do have the lab specific stakeholder group this afternoon. The link is on the DWAWG page in the DWAWG agenda. You'll want to follow the one that's specific to the stakeholder group. It is the second link provided on the agenda, and we'd love to see you there. There's going to be a lot of great information getting into the nuts and bolts of how to troubleshoot and how to make sure that things are as good as possible going out to your people. Other than that, thank you very much for your time this morning. As indicated, we will meet again in April, and we will be focusing heavily on the lead and copper rule revisions. However, if you have anything else that you would love to have covered, let us know. I'm sure we'll have at least some bandwidth available to cover any other topic of concern. Okay. Thank you guys all. I appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic day, and we'll see you again in April.